She was too old to be loved. That was what Eleanor Hart told herself every morning when she looked in the mirror. At 53 years old, with silver threads woven through her chestnut hair and fine lines mapping the corners of her eyes, she had accepted this truth the way one accepts the changing of seasons. Love was for the young. Romance was for those who still believed in fairy tales. She had stopped believing a long time ago. The rain fell in heavy sheets over the city of Boston that October evening, turning the streets into rivers of reflected light. Eleanor clutched her worn leather bag against her chest as she hurried down the sidewalk, her sensible shoes splashing through puddles she could barely see. The bus had broken down 3 blocks from her stop, and now she was walking through the kind of downpour that seemed almost personal, as if the sky itself had decided to punish her for some forgotten sin. She had just finished her shift at the hospital where she worked as a night nurse. 27 years of caring for others, of holding hands in the dark, of whispering comfort to strangers in their final hours. 27 years of giving everything she had to people she would never see again, while her own life remained empty of the kind of love she secretly craved. Her apartment was still 6 blocks away when the thunder cracked overhead like a warning from heaven. Eleanor ducked under the awning of a closed antique shop, pressing herself against the glass as lightning illuminated the deserted street. Her coat was soaked through, and she could feel the cold seeping into her bones with the patience of an old enemy. That was when she saw the car. It was black and sleek, the kind of vehicle that whispered of money and power without ever needing to shout. It glided through the rain like a predator through water, its headlights cutting through the darkness with surgical precision. Eleanor watched it pass, a moment of beauty in an otherwise miserable night, and then she watched it stop. The car reversed slowly, its red taillights glowing like embers in the storm. It came to a halt directly in front of her, and for a moment, Eleanor felt a flutter of something she could not name. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe something older and more dangerous. The window rolled down, and a man looked out at her. He was not young, but he was not old either. Perhaps 60, with silver hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite and softened by time. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, grey with hints of blue, and they studied her with an intensity that made her forget about the rain entirely. He did not smile. He simply looked at her as if he were solving a puzzle, as if she were something unexpected that had appeared in his carefully ordered world. "Get in," he said. His voice was low and commanding, the kind of voice that was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Eleanor shook her head, taking a step back against the shop window. She was a sensible woman, a practical woman. She did not get into cars with strangers, no matter how expensive the vehicle or how compelling the driver. "I do not know you," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The man tilted his head slightly, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "No," he agreed, "but you know this rain. You know how far you still have to walk, and you know that pneumonia does not care about propriety." She stared at him, rainwater dripping from her hair into her eyes. There was something about him, something that defied her usual caution. He did not feel dangerous, despite everything about him that suggested he should. He felt inevitable. The door opened, seemingly of its own accord. Eleanor Hart, who had spent 53 years being careful and responsible and alone, stepped out from under the awning and got into the car. The interior was warm and smelled of leather and something subtle she could not identify. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, something by Chopin that she recognized from long-ago piano lessons. The man said nothing as she settled into the seat beside him, merely nodded to the driver in front, and the car began to move. "Where do you live?" the man asked without looking at her. Eleanor gave him her address, her voice barely above a whisper. The unreality of the moment wrapped around her like the warmth of the car, and she found herself studying his profile in the dim light. Strong jaw, aristocratic nose, a small scar near his left ear that spoke of a history she could not imagine. "You work at St. Catherine Hospital," he said. It was not a question. Eleanor felt her heart skip. "How do you know that?" Now he did look at her, and his eyes held something that might have been respect. "I know many things, Eleanor Hart. I know you have worked the night shift for 15 years. I know you live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on Chestnut Street. I know you visit your mother's grave every Sunday, rain or shine, and I know that you have been invisible to this city for far too long. The words should have terrified her. This stranger knew her name, her routine, her grief. Every instinct she possessed should have been screaming at her to run, to escape, to call for help. But instead she felt something else entirely. She felt seen. "Who are you?" she asked, and her voice did not tremble. The man was silent for a long moment, watching the rain trace patterns on the window beside him. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "My name is Vincent Moretti," he said, "and I have been watching you for a very long time." The car turned onto a street Eleanor did not recognize, and she realized with a start that they were not heading toward her apartment at all. They were climbing into the hills above the city, where the houses grew larger and the lights grew fewer, where old money hid behind iron gates and 100-year-old trees. "This is not my street," Eleanor said, but she did not reach for the door handle. "No," Vincent agreed, "it is not. But your street has a broken lock on the front door and a heating system that has not worked properly since March. Tonight you will stay somewhere warm. Tomorrow you will have choices, but tonight you will be safe." She should have argued. She should have demanded to be taken home, to her familiar rooms and her familiar loneliness. But something in his voice stopped her, something in the way. He said the word safe, as if it were a promise he had been waiting his whole life to make. The car passed through a gate that opened at their approach and wound up a long driveway lined with oak trees, whose bare branches reached toward the sky like supplicating hands. At the end of the drive stood a house that was not quite a mansion, but was far more than a home. Stone walls, tall windows, a door of dark wood that swung open as they approached, light spilling out into the rain like a welcome. A woman appeared in the doorway, middle-aged with kind eyes and an apron dusted with flour. She took one look at Eleanor, soaked and shivering and confused, and immediately began to fuss. "You poor thing," the woman said, ushering her inside with gentle hands. "Look at you, half frozen. I am Maria. Come, come, we will get you warm and dry. Mr. Vincent, you should have called ahead." Vincent followed them inside, and for the first time, Eleanor saw him in proper light. He was taller than she had, realized, broad-shouldered and imposing, but there was a weariness around his eyes that softened his severity. He removed his coat and handed it to Maria without looking away from Eleanor. "See that she has everything she needs," he said. "The blue guest room. And Maria, she may have questions. Answer them honestly." Maria nodded, as if this were the most natural request in the world, and then Vincent was gone, disappearing down a hallway that swallowed him in shadow. Eleanor stood in the entrance, hall of a stranger's home, dripping rainwater onto marble floors, and wondered if she had finally lost her mind. She was a sensible woman, a practical woman. She did not follow mysterious men into hillside estates. She did not stand in foyers that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. But here she was, and somehow, impossibly, she did not want to leave. Maria led her up a sweeping staircase and down a corridor lined with paintings that looked old enough to belong in museums. To the key, blue guest room turned out to be a suite larger than Eleanor's entire apartment, decorated in shades of navy and cream, with a four-poster bed that looked like something from a period drama. "There are clothes in the wardrobe," Maria said, pointing to a massive armoire. "Tomorrow we will have your things brought from your apartment, but for tonight these should fit. The bathroom is through that door. Take a hot bath. I will bring up soup and tea." "Wait," Eleanor said as Maria turned to leave. "Please, who is he? Who is Vincent Moretti?" Maria paused at the door, her expression shifting into something complicated. "He is a man who has done terrible things," she said quietly, "and he is a man who is trying to do better. That is all I can tell you, Mrs. Hart. The rest is his story to share." And then she was gone, and Eleanor was alone in a blue room in a stranger's house, listening to the rain against the windows and wondering if she was dreaming. She did take the bath. The water was hot and scented with lavender, and she stayed in it until her fingers pruned and the chill finally left her bones. The clothes in the wardrobe fit perfectly. Soft cotton pajamas and a robe of deep blue silk that felt like water against her skin. When she emerged, she found a tray waiting on the table by the window, cream of tomato soup, crusty bread, and tea in a delicate porcelain cup. She ate by the window, watching the storm rage outside, and thought about everything that had led her to this moment. A broken bus, a stranger in a black car, a man who knew her name and her grief and somehow made her feel not afraid but protected. She should call someone, the police perhaps, or her sister in Connecticut who always said she worried too much. But her phone was in her bag, and her bag was somewhere downstairs, and truthfully she did not want to break the spell. Whatever this was, whoever Vincent Moretti was, she wanted to see where it led. Sleep came easier than it should have. The bed was soft, the sheets were warm, and the rain had faded to a gentle whisper against the glass. Eleanor closed her eyes and drifted, and if she dreamed, she did not remember. When she woke, the storm had passed, and pale morning light was filtering through the curtains. For a moment she did not know where she was, and then it all came rushing back. The rain, the car, the man with storm-grey eyes, and she sat up in a bed that was not hers in a house she did not know. There was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," Eleanor said, pulling the robe tighter around herself. Maria entered with a breakfast tray and a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart. I hope you slept well. Mr. Vincent asks if you would join him for breakfast when you are ready. There is no rush." Eleanor looked at the tray, fresh fruit, yogurt, coffee, orange juice, and then at Maria's kind face. "I should go home," she said, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. "You could," Maria agreed. "Your clothes are dry and Thomas can drive you whenever you wish, but perhaps have breakfast first. Mr. Vincent has something he would like to tell you." "Tell me what?" Eleanor asked. Maria shook her head, still smiling. "That is his story, Mrs. Hart, not mine." She left the tray and departed, and Eleanor was alone again with her thoughts and her questions and the strange certainty that her life was about to change in ways she could not predict. She dressed in her own clothes, now dry and neatly pressed, and made her way downstairs. The house was even more impressive in daylight. High ceilings, antique furniture, windows that looked out over gardens that must have been beautiful in summer. She followed the sound of clinking dishes and found herself in a dining room where Vincent Moretti sat at the head of a long table, newspaper in hand, coffee at his elbow. He looked up as she entered, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but something close, something warm. "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Sit, eat. We have much to discuss." Eleanor sat. She poured herself coffee from the silver pot and selected a croissant from the basket between them. And then she looked at him, this stranger who had pulled her from the rain and brought her to his castle, and asked the question that had been burning in her throat since the night before. "Why me?" she asked. "Of all the people you could have helped, why did you stop for me?" Vincent set down his newspaper and folded his hands on the table. His eyes, she noticed, were not as cold as they had seemed in the darkness. They were tired and sad, and somehow impossibly hopeful. "Because you reminded me of someone I lost," he said, "and because I have spent too many years watching people I could have saved walk by in the rain. Last night I decided to stop watching." "Who did I remind you of?" Eleanor asked softly. "My wife," Vincent said. "She passed 5 years ago. Breast complications. She was the only good thing in my life. And when she died, I thought goodness was finished with me forever. But then I saw you, Eleanor, walking through the rain with your head down and your heart breaking and your whole self invisible to a world that should have been paying attention. And I thought, here is someone who knows what it means to be alone." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back and took a sip of coffee to steady herself. "I am sorry about your wife," she said. "And I am sorry about your husband," Vincent replied. Eleanor's cup clattered against the saucer. "How did you—" "I told you," Vincent said gently. "I know many things. I know Harold Hart passed 8 years ago. Heart failure. I know you held his hand until the end, and I know you have not let yourself love anyone since. I know you think you are too old to be wanted, too ordinary to be seen, too tired to start again. But you are wrong, Eleanor. You are wrong about all of it. She stared at him, this man who knew the shape of her grief, and felt something crack open inside her chest. It was not love, not yet, not so soon, but it was something adjacent to it, recognition, understanding, the strange and terrifying intimacy of being truly known. "Who are you?" she asked again, and this time she meant something different. Not what is your name, but what are you? What world do you come from that lets you know so much about a stranger? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed back from the table and stood, moving to the window where morning light turned his silver hair to white. "I'm a businessman," he said finally. "I have interests in shipping, real estate, construction. I employ over 2,000 people in this city alone, and my decisions affect the lives of many more. But you deserve the truth, Eleanor, so here it is. Not all of my business is legal. Not all of my methods are kind. I have done things that would make you look at me differently, and I have made enemies who would do anything to see me fall." He turned to face her, and his expression was open in a way it had not been before. Vulnerable, almost pleading. "I am what they call a crime boss," he said. "The head of a family that has operated in this city for 3 generations. I have tried to move away from the worst of it, the violence, the cruelty, but the shadow of what I was follows me still. That is who I am, Eleanor. That is the man who pulled you from the rain." Eleanor should have been afraid. She should have risen from her chair and demanded to be taken home immediately. She should have seen him as a monster, a criminal, a danger to everything she believed in. But she did not. Instead, she saw a man who was tired, a man who was lonely, a man who had watched his wife die and spent 5 years wandering through his own kind of storm, looking for a light that never came. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I am going to ask you to stay," Vincent said. "Not forever, not as anything other than what you want to be. But I have a proposal for you, Eleanor Hart, one that could change both our lives." She waited, heart pounding, as he crossed back to the table and sat down across from her. "I need a nurse," he said. "Someone I can trust. Someone who has no connection to my world and no reason to betray me. My people are loyal, but they are known. The moment anyone in my organization seeks medical care outside these walls, my enemies learn of it. I need someone invisible. Someone who can come and go without raising suspicion. Someone exactly like you." "You want me to be your personal nurse," Eleanor said slowly. "I want you to be part of my household," Vincent corrected. "You would have your own quarters, your own salary, your own freedom. You would treat my staff when they need it, and you would be here when I need you. In exchange, I would give you something money cannot buy: purpose, protection, and perhaps in time, something neither of us expected to find again." Eleanor looked at him, this man who was offering her a life she had never imagined, a life of danger and luxury and secrets, a life that was the opposite of everything she had known. And she thought about her apartment with its broken lock, her job with its endless nights, her sister who called once a month out of obligation, her cat who had died last spring, her life, small and quiet and invisible, stretching out before her like an empty road leading nowhere. "I need time," she said finally, "to think." Vincent nodded, unsurprised. "Of course, Thomas will take you home. Take all the time you need. But Eleanor," and here his voice softened to something almost tender, "do not take too long. We are neither of us young, and there is still so much living left to do. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If you have ever felt invisible, overlooked, or too old to matter, this is your sign. Subscribe now and follow a story that will remind you it is never too late to be seen." 3 days passed before Eleanor made her decision. She returned to her apartment that first morning and found it exactly as she had left it, small, dark, silent. The heating still did not work properly. The lock on the front door was still broken. The stack of bills on her kitchen counter was still there, waiting to be paid with money she barely had. She went to work that night and the next, walking the same corridors she had walked for 15 years, checking the same monitors, holding the same hands. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt different. She kept thinking about Vincent Moretti, not the crime boss, not the man with enemies who would do anything to see him fall, but the man who had looked at her in the rain and seen something worth saving. The man who had spoken of his wife with such tenderness that it made Eleanor's heart ache. The man who had offered her purpose and protection and perhaps something more. On the third night, she called her sister. "You sound different," Carol said. "What happened?" Eleanor told her. Not everything, not the crime boss part, not the shadow world of secrets, but the essence of it. A wealthy man had offered her a job, live-in nursing care for his household, good salary, private quarters, a chance to start over. "And you are considering this," Carol said, her voice flat with disbelief. "Eleanor, you do not know this man. He could be anyone. He could be dangerous." "He probably is," Eleanor admitted. "But Carol, I have spent my whole life being safe. I have been careful and sensible and alone, and what has it gotten me? A one-bedroom apartment I can barely afford. A job that is slowly killing me. A life that nobody would notice if it ended tomorrow. Maybe dangerous is exactly what I need." Carol was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed, and Eleanor could hear the resignation in it. "You are going to do this, are you not? No matter what I say." "I think I am," Eleanor said. "I think I have to." The next morning, she called the number Vincent had given her. Maria answered on the second ring, and her voice was warm with something that sounded like relief. "Mrs. Hart," she said, "Mr. Vincent was hoping to hear from you. Shall I send Thomas to collect you?" Eleanor looked around her apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling, at the stack of bills, at the photographs of Harold that had watched over her loneliness for 8 years, and took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. "Tell him I accept." Thomas arrived within the hour, a quiet man in his 50s who handled her 2 suitcases as if they weighed nothing. Eleanor took one last look at her apartment before closing the door, and she felt something she had not expected. Not sadness, but release. Like setting down a burden she had carried so long, she had forgotten it was there. The drive to Vincent's estate took 20 minutes, and this time Eleanor watched the scenery with different eyes. She was not a guest now. She was something else entirely. An employee, a resident, a part of whatever strange world existed behind those iron gates. The house looked different in daylight without the storm. It was beautiful in a severe way, all stone and shadow and old-world elegance. Gardens stretched out behind it, winter bare but carefully tended. A fountain stood silent in the courtyard, waiting for spring to bring it back to life. Maria met her at the door and led her to her quarters. Not the blue guest room, but a suite on the 3rd floor with its own sitting room and kitchenette. The windows looked out over the garden, and the afternoon light painted everything in shades of gold. "These are yours," Maria said simply. "Mr. Vincent wants you to be comfortable. Dinner is at 7. He hopes you will join him." Eleanor spent the afternoon unpacking and exploring. Her suite was larger than her entire apartment had been, furnished with antiques that looked like they belonged in museums. There was a small study off the bedroom, with bookshelves that reached to the ceiling and a desk by the window where she could write letters or read, or simply watch the clouds move across the sky. It was beautiful, it was luxurious, and it was terrifying in a way she could not quite name. At 7, she made her way downstairs to the dining room. Vincent was already there, standing by the window with a glass of wine in his hand. He turned as she entered, and something in his expression shifted. Pleasure, relief, and something deeper that she could not identify. "You came," he said. "I said I would," Eleanor replied. He smiled, and it transformed his face entirely. The severity fell away, and she saw the man he might have been before the world hardened him, the man his wife had loved. "Come," he said. "Sit. Tell me what you need." They talked through dinner, about her medical background, about the equipment she would require, about the kinds of injuries and illnesses she might be expected to treat. Vincent was frank about the nature of his business without being explicit. His people sometimes got hurt, he explained. Accidents happened, and there were those who could not risk going to hospitals, whose identities needed to remain protected. Eleanor listened and nodded and asked practical questions, and all the while she was aware of the strangeness of it all. Here she was, a 53-year-old nurse from Boston, sitting in a dining room that cost more than her annual salary, discussing how to treat wounds that she was not supposed to ask about. But there was something else too, something she had not expected. Vincent looked at her when he spoke, really looked at her, the way no one had looked at her in years. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He treated her not as a servant or an employee, but as an equal, as someone whose thoughts mattered. It had been so long since anyone had made her feel that way. After dinner, he walked her to the library, a vast room lined with books from floor to ceiling, with leather chairs by the fireplace and tall windows that looked out over the dark garden. A fire burned low in the grate, casting dancing shadows across the oriental carpet. "This is my favorite room in the house," Vincent said. "Catherine and I used to read here every evening. After she passed, I could not bring myself to enter it for almost a year, but lately I have found myself coming back, perhaps hoping to find her here somehow." Eleanor felt the weight of his grief, so similar to her own. "Harold used to read to me," she said softly. "Mysteries, mostly. He did all the voices. I have not been able to finish a book since he died." Vincent nodded slowly, and there was understanding in his eyes. "Perhaps," he said, "we can learn to read again, together." The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Eleanor set up her medical station in a room on the ground floor that had once been a study. Maria helped her order supplies, bandages, medications, equipment, and within a week she had a proper clinic capable of handling most emergencies. Her first patient was a young man named Marco, who had cut his hand badly while working on one of the cars in the garage. He was nervous around her at first, clearly unused to a stranger in the household, but Eleanor's calm competence soon put him at ease. She cleaned the wound, stitched it neatly, and sent him on his way with instructions to keep it dry and return in a week to have the stitches removed. Word spread quickly. Within a month, she had treated sprains, fevers, migraines, and one case of food poisoning that turned out to be nothing more than too much of Maria's excellent cooking. The household staff came to trust her, confiding their aches and worries, seeking her advice on everything from insomnia to heartbreak. And through it all there was Vincent. He joined her for dinner every evening, and sometimes for breakfast as well. They talked about books and music and the places they had traveled in their youth. They talked about their late spouses, sharing memories that were both painful and precious. They talked about nothing at all, sitting in comfortable silence by the library fire while snow began to fall outside. He never touched her inappropriately, never made demands or suggestions that crossed lines, but Eleanor was aware of something growing between them, a warmth, a connection, a slow unfurling of trust that felt like spring arriving after a long winter. One evening, about 6 weeks after she arrived, Vincent took her to meet someone special. They drove to a nursing home in Cambridge, a beautiful facility that looked more like a country club than a care centre. Vincent led her down a corridor lined with photographs and into a sun-filled room where an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair by the window. "This is my mother," Vincent said, "Lucia Moretti. She is 91 years old, and she is the reason I am the man I am today." Lucia's eyes were clouded with age, but they sharpened as she looked at Eleanor. "So, she," said in a voice that still held traces of an Italian accent, "you are the woman my Vincent cannot stop talking about." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He talks about me." "Every visit," Lucia confirmed. "The nurse who came in from the rain, the woman who reminds him how to smile. I was beginning to think he had invented you." "She is very real," Vincent said, and there was something in his voice that made Eleanor's heart skip. "More real than anything I have known in a long time." They stayed for an hour, and Eleanor found herself charmed by the old woman's wit and warmth. Lucia told stories of Vincent as a boy, stubborn, serious, always trying to protect those weaker than himself. She spoke of her late husband, Vincent's father, and the complicated legacy he had left behind. "He was not a good man," Lucia said bluntly, "but he loved his family, and Vincent has spent his whole life trying to be better than his father was, to use the power we built for something other than harm." As they drove back to the estate that evening, Eleanor was quiet, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she spoke. "Your mother is remarkable," she said. "She is," Vincent agreed. "She is also the one who convinced me to change. After Catherine died, I was ready to burn everything down, to walk away from the family, the business, everything. But my mother sat me down and said, 'If you leave, someone worse will take your place. If you stay, you can make it better.' So I stayed, and I have been trying every day to make it better." Eleanor looked at him, this complicated man with his shadowed past and his hopeful eyes, and felt something shift in her heart. Something that had been closed for a very long time, beginning to open again. "I think you are succeeding," she said quietly. Vincent glanced at her, and for a moment his guard dropped completely. She saw the loneliness, the doubt, the desperate hope that he was on the right path. "I hope so," he said. "God, I hope so." Winter deepened over the estate, turning the gardens into a wonderland of white. Eleanor learned the rhythms of the household, the early morning bustle of the kitchen, the quiet afternoons when Vincent was away on business, the evenings by the fire when the whole world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. She learned other things too, that Vincent's organization was vast, spanning shipping routes and construction companies and real estate holdings across the eastern seaboard, that he was working, slowly and carefully, to transition the family business toward legitimacy, that there were those within his own ranks who resisted the change, who preferred the old ways, who saw his reforms as weakness. And she learned that there were enemies outside as well. Names she did not know, faces she never saw, but whose presence hung over the household like a distant storm. But in those early months, the storm stayed distant. Eleanor treated colds and cuts and the occasional bout of flu. She sat with Lucia on Saturday afternoons, listening to stories of the old country and learning phrases of Italian that made the old woman laugh. She read in the library, worked in the small greenhouse where Maria grew herbs year-round, and found herself, slowly and unexpectedly, building a life. And then there was the night that changed everything. It was late February, and a heavy snow was falling outside. Eleanor had gone to bed early, tired from a long day of reorganizing her clinic, and was drifting toward sleep, when she heard the commotion. Voices in the hallway, footsteps running, the sound of the front door slamming open. She threw on her robe and hurried downstairs to find chaos. Two men she did not recognize were carrying a third between them, a young man whose face was pale and whose shirt was dark with something Eleanor recognized immediately. She pushed through the growing crowd, her training taking over, and dropped to her knees beside him. "What happened?" she demanded. "Car accident," one of the men said. His voice was shaking. "On the highway." "The snow. We could not see." "Get him to the clinic," Eleanor ordered. "Now." They carried him through the house and laid him on the examination table Eleanor had prepared for emergencies. She cut away his shirt and assessed the damage, deep lacerations across his chest and abdomen, probably from broken glass. He was losing fluid fast, and his pulse was weak. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor worked harder than she had worked in years. She cleaned and stitched and monitored, drawing on every skill she had learned in nearly 3 decades of nursing. Maria assisted her, steady and calm, handing her supplies and wiping sweat from her forehead. At some point, Vincent appeared. He stood in the doorway, watching, his face carved from stone. He did not speak. He did not interfere. He simply watched as Eleanor fought to save the young man's life, and she did. When the last stitch was in place and the young man's vitals had stabilized, Eleanor straightened up and let out a breath she felt she had been holding for hours. "He will need to be transported to a hospital for a transfusion," she said, "but he will survive." Vincent moved then, crossing the room in 3 long strides and taking her hands in his. She was surprised to find that she was trembling, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. "You saved him," Vincent said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Anthony is my nephew, my sister's only son. You saved his life." "I did my job," Eleanor said, but her voice was shaking too. "No." Vincent shook his head. "You did far more than that. You gave him back to us. You gave him back to his mother." He raised her hands to his lips and kissed them, and the gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," Vincent whispered. "Thank you, Eleanor." That night, after Anthony had been transported to a private hospital and the household had finally settled, Eleanor sat alone in the library. She was exhausted but too wired to sleep, her mind still replaying every moment of the emergency. Vincent found her there, staring into the dying fire. "You should rest," he said. "I know," she replied, "but I cannot seem to stop shaking." He sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "The fear comes after," he said, "when the danger has passed and you realize how close it was. I know that feeling well." Eleanor looked at him, this man who had seen so much violence, who had lived, with danger as a constant companion. "How do you bear it?" she asked. "I remind myself what I am fighting for," Vincent said, "the people I love, the future I am trying to build. And now—" He paused, and his eyes met hers. "I remind myself that I am not alone anymore." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Eleanor felt her heart pounding, felt the weight of everything unspoken. "Vincent," she said softly. He shook his head, cutting her off. "I know," he said. "I know you did not come here for this. I know you are not looking for romance or complication, and I would never ask you for anything you were not ready to give. But Eleanor, I need you to know that you have changed me. These past months, having you here, watching you care for my people, listening to you laugh, it has brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever." Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks, though she did not remember starting to cry. "I thought I was too old," she whispered. "Too old to be wanted. Too old to be seen." Vincent reached out and gently wiped a tear from her face. "You are beautiful," he said. "You are kind and brave and extraordinary. And I see you, Eleanor Hart. I see all of you, and I am honored every day that you chose to stay." She did not know who moved first. Perhaps they moved together, drawn by the same gravity that had pulled her into his car on that rainy night so many months ago. But suddenly, his arms were around her, and her face was pressed against his chest, and she was crying in earnest now, crying for all the years of loneliness, for Harold who she had loved and lost, for the life she had given up on ever having. And Vincent held her. He held her until the tears stopped, and then he held her a little longer, and she felt something she had not felt in nearly a decade. She felt safe. This is the moment, friends. This is where we need to pause and connect. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever wondered if your best days were behind you, if you have ever longed for someone to truly see you, leave a comment right now with 3 simple words. I deserve love. Go ahead and type it. I deserve love. Because you do. Every single one of you deserves to be seen, to be cherished, to be held exactly like this. Type it now and let me see who understands. Spring came slowly to the estate, melting the snow and coaxing green shoots from the frozen ground. Eleanor watched the garden transform day by day, tending to the greenhouse with Maria, learning the names of flowers she had never seen before. Her relationship with Vincent had shifted after that night in the library. They were not lovers, not yet, not in any physical sense, but they were something more than friends, partners perhaps, companions, 2 lonely souls who had found in each other a reason to hope. They took walks in the garden when the weather allowed, discussing everything from politics to philosophy to the merits of various pasta shapes. Vincent told her about his childhood, the strict father, the loving mother, the burden of expectation that had been placed on his shoulders before he was old enough to understand what it meant. Eleanor told him about Harold, about their quiet life together, about the way grief had hollowed her out and left her wandering through years that felt like empty rooms. Lucia observed it all with undisguised satisfaction. "It is about time," she told Eleanor during one of their Saturday visits. "That boy has been alone too long. And so have you. We are taking things slowly," Eleanor said. "At your age, slow is smart," Lucia replied. "You know what you want, you know what matters. Why rush?" But not everyone was pleased with the changes at the estate. Eleanor first noticed the tension during a dinner party in late March. Vincent had invited several of his business associates, legitimate ones, he assured her, to discuss a new real estate development on the waterfront. She had offered to stay in her rooms for the evening, not wanting to intrude on business, but Vincent had insisted she join him. "You are part of this household now," he said. "I want them to know that." The dinner was elegant but uncomfortable. The men who came, sleek and polished in expensive suits, looked at Eleanor with barely concealed curiosity. She could feel them assessing her, trying to understand her place in Vincent's world. But it was one man in particular who made her uneasy. His name was Roberto Castellan, and he was one of Vincent's oldest associates. He was perhaps 60, with iron-grey hair and eyes like chips of obsidian. When he shook Eleanor's hand, his grip was too firm, his smile too sharp. "So this is the mysterious nurse," he said. "I have heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice light. "Oh, absolutely." Roberto's smile did not reach his eyes. "Vincent speaks of little else these days. I confess, I was curious to meet the woman who has captured so much of his attention." Something about the way he said it made Eleanor's skin crawl. She excused herself as soon as politeness allowed and spent the rest of the evening helping Maria in the kitchen. Later that night, Vincent found her in the library. "I saw Roberto speaking with you," he said. "I apologize. He can be intense." "Who is he?" Eleanor asked. "My father's oldest friend," Vincent replied, and his voice carried a weight of history. "He has been with the family for 40 years. He was loyal to my father, and he is loyal to me. But he does not approve of the changes I have been making. He thinks I am making us weak." "What changes?" Eleanor pressed. "Moving toward legitimacy," Vincent said. "Shutting down the parts of the business that operate outside the law. Roberto believes we are abandoning what made us powerful. He does not understand that I am trying to build something that will last longer than any of us. And he sees me as part of that," Eleanor said. "A distraction." "Perhaps." Vincent's jaw tightened. "But you are not a distraction, Eleanor. You are a reminder of why I am doing this, of who I want to become." They did not speak of Roberto again, but Eleanor found herself watching more carefully. She noticed the way certain staff members deferred to Roberto when Vincent was not present. She noticed the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. She noticed the way Roberto's eyes followed her when he visited the estate, cold and calculating. Something was wrong. She could feel it the way she could feel a patient's fever before the thermometer confirmed it. Something was very wrong. The confirmation came on a warm April evening. Eleanor was working late in her clinic, updating patient files and ordering supplies. The house was quiet. Vincent was away on business in New York, and most of the staff had retired for the night. She was about to close her laptop when she heard voices from the hallway. She recognized Roberto's voice immediately, low and urgent, speaking in rapid Italian, that she could not follow. Another voice responded, younger, nervous. Eleanor held her breath, listening. The voices came closer, and she caught fragments of English mixed with Italian. Vincent, the woman, too close, dangerous. And then, clearly, she has to go. One way or another, she has to go. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She stayed frozen in place as the footsteps passed her door and faded down the hallway. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure they must have heard it. But no one came. No, one knew she had been listening. She did not sleep that night. She sat in her room with the door locked, playing the words over and over in her mind. She has to go, one way or another. Roberto was planning something, and she was the target. In the morning, she considered calling Vincent. But what would she say? That she had overheard a conversation she was not supposed to hear, that she suspected one of his oldest associates was plotting against her. She had no proof. Only a feeling, a fragment, a fear. Instead, she went to Maria. The older woman listened without interrupting as Eleanor described what she had heard. When Eleanor finished, Maria's face was grave. "Roberto is dangerous," she said quietly. "He has always been dangerous. But he was also useful, and Vincent's father valued that. Now," she shook her head, "now he sees the changes Vincent is making and he is afraid. Afraid of losing power, afraid of becoming irrelevant." "What should I do?" Eleanor asked. Maria was silent for a long moment. Then she took Eleanor's hands in hers. "Be careful," she said. "Watch your back, and when Vincent returns, tell him everything. He needs to know." Vincent returned 3 days later, and Eleanor told him. She watched his face as she spoke, watched the warmth drain away and something cold and dangerous take its place. This was a side of him she had not seen before. The crime boss, the man who had built an empire and defended it against all challenges. "Are you certain?" he asked when she finished. His voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "I know what I heard," Eleanor said. "I am not imagining things. I never thought you were." Vincent was silent for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. "You should have called me. The moment you heard it, you should have called. I did not want to worry you, and I had no proof." "Your word is proof enough," Vincent said. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, a gesture that was becoming familiar between them. "I will handle this, Eleanor. Roberto has been given too much latitude for too long. It ends now." "What will you do?" she asked. "What I should have done years ago," Vincent replied. "Send him away, strip his authority, make it clear that anyone who threatens you threatens me." He was true to his word. Within a week, Roberto Castellan had been removed from all positions of power within the organization. Eleanor did not know the details. She did not want to know, but she saw the result. Roberto's face twisted with rage as he left the estate for the last time. The whispered relief among the staff, the way Vincent's shoulders relaxed, just slightly, as if a weight had been lifted. But Eleanor knew better than to believe it was truly over. She had seen the look in Roberto's eyes as he left, the hatred, the promise of revenge. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Summer came to the estate in a blaze of color and warmth. The gardens exploded with roses and lilies, and Eleanor spent hours walking the paths between the flower beds, marveling at beauty she had never expected to find in her life. Her relationship with Vincent deepened as the months passed. They took day trips to the coast, walking on beaches she had never known existed, eating at small restaurants where no one recognized them. They attended concerts in the city, sitting side by side in the darkness while music washed over them. They read to each other in the library, taking turns with chapters, learning the rhythms of each other's voices. And one night in June, under a sky blazing with stars, Vincent kissed her for the first time. It was gentle, tender, the kiss of a man who had waited his whole life for this moment and wanted to make it last. Eleanor felt tears on her cheeks, tears of joy, of disbelief, of gratitude for a gift she had never expected to receive. "I love you," Vincent said against her lips. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you in that rain. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Eleanor looked at him, this complicated, wounded, beautiful man, and felt her heart open fully at last. "I love you too," she said, and it was the truest thing she had ever spoken. They did not rush. They were past the age of rushing, past the impatience of youth. They built their love slowly, carefully, like craftsmen building something meant to last generations. They talked about everything and nothing. They shared meals and silences and secrets they had never told another soul. Lucia was overjoyed. "Finally," she said, clasping Eleanor's hands, "finally my son has found his match." The summer passed in a golden haze of happiness. For the first time in nearly a decade, Eleanor allowed herself to believe that she had found her place in the world, that she belonged somewhere, that she was loved. But the shadow of Roberto Castellan had not truly lifted. The first sign came in August, when one of Vincent's warehouses was destroyed in a fire. Authorities ruled it an accident, but Vincent knew better. He doubled security at the estate and hired additional guards. He began sleeping less, spending more hours in his study, taking calls at all hours of the night. Eleanor watched with growing concern. She saw the lines deepen on his face, saw the lightness they had cultivated together beginning to fade. "What is happening?" she asked one night. "Roberto," Vincent said, the name bitter on his tongue. "He has been building alliances, turning old friends against me, spreading lies that I have gone soft, that I no longer have the strength to lead. What will you do?" "What I must." Vincent's eyes were hard. "He challenged me once and lost. Now he is trying to undermine everything I have built. I will not allow it." The attacks continued throughout the fall. A construction project was sabotaged. A shipment of goods disappeared. 3 of Vincent's most trusted men were hospitalized after an ambush that left them badly injured. Eleanor treated the men herself, working through the night to stabilize them. As she cleaned wounds and changed bandages, she felt the anger building inside her. Anger at Roberto for his pettiness and cruelty. Anger at a world where love and peace had to be defended with such violence. One night in November, Vincent came to her with news. "We have found him," he said. His voice was calm, but Eleanor could see the storm in his eyes. "Roberto has been hiding in a property upstate. Tomorrow I am going to end this." Eleanor felt fear claw at her heart. "Let me come with you." "No." Vincent's answer was immediate. "This is not your world, Eleanor. This is not what you signed up for." "I signed up for you," she said. "Wherever you go, I want to be there." Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room and took her in his arms. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known," he said against her hair, "and I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. But I need to know you are safe. I need to know that no matter what happens tomorrow, you will be here when I come home." Eleanor wanted to argue, she wanted to insist, but she saw the fear in his eyes, not fear for himself, but fear for her, and she understood. "Promise me you will come home," she said. "I promise," Vincent said, "and I have never broken a promise to you." He left before dawn the next morning, and Eleanor watched from the window until the car disappeared down the driveway. The day passed slowly, every hour stretching into eternity. Maria stayed, close, bringing tea and food that Eleanor could not eat, keeping up a stream of gentle conversation that Eleanor could barely follow. The staff moved through the house like ghosts, speaking in whispers, watching the phone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Vincent. "It is done," he said, and his voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Roberto is in custody. He is going to face justice for what he has done. Real justice, legal justice. The authorities are involved now. He will not hurt anyone again." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of overwhelming love. "Come home," she said. "Please, just come home." "I am on my way," Vincent replied. "And Eleanor, I love you. I love you more than I know how to say." "I love you too," she whispered. "I will be waiting." Vincent returned home as the moon was rising, stepping through the front door looking older and more tired than Eleanor had ever seen him. She met him in the entrance hall, and he wrapped his arms around her and held her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "It is over," he said, "truly over this time. Roberto is finished. His allies have scattered. The authorities are handling everything now." "And you?" Eleanor asked, pulling back to look at his face. "Are you all right?" "I am now," Vincent said, "now that I am home with you." They walked together to the library and sat by the fire, hands intertwined, watching the flames. Dance. Outside, snow had begun to fall, the first snow of the coming winter covering the world in white. "I want to ask you something," Vincent said after a long silence. Eleanor felt her heart quicken. "Ask me." Vincent reached into his jacket and withdrew a small box of black velvet. He opened it, and inside was a ring, simple and elegant, a single diamond set in a band of white gold. "Eleanor Hart," he said, and his voice trembled slightly. "I know I am old. I know I come with complications and shadows and a past that would make most people run. But I also know that I love you with everything I am and everything I hope to become. I know that these past months with you have been the happiest of my life, and I know that I want to spend whatever time I have left in this world by your side. Will you marry me?" Eleanor looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they had built together from the ruins of their separate lonelinesses. She thought of Harold, who would have wanted her to find happiness again. She thought of all the years she had spent believing she was too old to be loved, too invisible to be seen. And she thought of the rain that night, and the stranger who had stopped his car and changed everything. "Yes," she said, and her voice was clear and strong and certain. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her, as if it had been waiting all along. They married in the spring, in the garden of the estate surrounded by flowers that seemed to have bloomed just for them. Lucia attended in her wheelchair, beaming with joy. Maria and the household staff filled the seats, their faces wet with happy tears. Carol came from Connecticut, looking skeptical until she saw the way Vincent looked at Eleanor, and then she cried too. It was a small wedding, intimate and perfect. Just family, the family they had chosen, the family they had built. After the ceremony, Vincent led Eleanor to the greenhouse where a new bench had been installed, overlooking the roses. A small plaque was affixed to it, for Eleanor, who reminded me that love has no expiration date. She laughed and cried and kissed him, and he held her as the afternoon sun streamed through the glass and warmed them both. The months that followed were the most peaceful of Eleanor's life. She continued her work as the household nurse, but now she did it as Vincent's wife, as the lady of the estate. She visited Lucia every Saturday and learned more Italian. She planted flowers in the garden and read books in the library, and woke every morning next to a man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. At 54 years old, Eleanor Hart, now Eleanor Moretti, had found what she had stopped believing existed. She had found love. 1 year after their wedding, on a rainy October evening that reminded them both of the night they had met, Vincent and Eleanor sat together in the library. A fire crackled in the grate, and snow was forecast for later in the week. "I have been thinking," Vincent said. "About what?" "About the future." He took her hand in his. "I am 62 years old, Eleanor. I have spent most of my life building something that exists in the shadows, but now I want to build something in the light, something that will last, something good." "What do you mean?" "The transition is complete," he said. "The family business is fully legitimate now. We are no longer operating outside the law. But I want to do more than just stop doing harm. I want to actively do good. I want to use what we have built to help people." Eleanor felt her heart swell with pride and love. "What are you thinking?" "A foundation," Vincent said, "in Catherine's name, and in yours. A foundation that helps people who feel invisible, people who have been forgotten by the world, people who need someone to stop and offer them a ride in from the rain." Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes. "Vincent," she whispered, "that is beautiful." "You are beautiful," he said, pulling her close. "You changed everything, Eleanor. You reminded me that it is never too late to start again, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserved the second chance you gave me." They sat together as the rain streamed down the windows, two people who had once believed their stories were over, discovering that they had only just begun. The foundation was established the following spring. It provided housing for displaced families, medical care for those who could not afford it, scholarships for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Eleanor threw herself into the work, using her nursing background to help develop healthcare programs that reached the communities that needed them most. She found purpose in the work, deep, abiding purpose that filled the empty spaces that grief had carved into her heart. And she found it alongside Vincent, who proved every day that the man he had become was worthy of the love she had given him. Lucia passed away peacefully 2 years after the wedding, surrounded by family, with Vincent holding one hand and Eleanor holding the other. Her last words were a blessing, a thank you, a prayer that they would continue to find joy in each other for all the years to come. They buried her next to Vincent's father in the family cemetery, and they mourned together, and they healed together, as partners do. The years that followed were rich with love and purpose and quiet joy. Eleanor and Vincent traveled, to Italy, to France, to all the places they had dreamed of seeing. They read to each other every evening. They walked in the garden every morning. They laughed more than Eleanor had ever laughed in her life, and they loved with the fierce, grateful intensity of people who know how precious time truly is. At 60, Eleanor looked in the mirror and no longer saw a woman too old to be loved. She saw a woman who had been found, a woman who had been cherished, a woman who had built a life she never imagined possible, and standing beside her, silver-haired and smiling, was the man who had made it all possible. She was too old to be loved. That was what she had believed on that rainy night so many years ago. Too old and too invisible and too tired to hope. But she had been wrong. Love, she had learned, had no expiration date. Love came when it was ready, to those who were brave enough to let it in. Love transformed strangers into family, houses into homes, endings into beginnings. And love, true love, patient love, love that saw you as you truly were. Love could find you anywhere, even standing in the rain, even when you had stopped looking, even when you thought your story was already over. Eleanor Hart Moretti was 70 years old when she died, peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Vincent for 15 years. He was beside her when she took her last breath, holding her hand the way he had held it through every storm, every joy, every ordinary Tuesday that had somehow become extraordinary. He lived 3 more years after her, and he spent them continuing the work they had started together. The foundation grew, lives were changed, and every night he sat in the library where they had first fallen in love and told her about his day. When he joined her at last, they buried him next to her in the garden where they had married, surrounded by the roses she had planted. The inscription on their shared headstone read, "They found each other in the rain. They loved each other until the end. They proved that home is not a place and home is a person." And for the rest of time, whenever it rained on the estate, the staff would smile and say that Vincent and Eleanor were dancing together somewhere, just as they had on their wedding day. 2 lonely souls who had found each other, 2 broken hearts that had healed together, 2 people who had proven that it is never, never too late. If you have watched this far, it is because this story touched your heart. And if it touched your heart, then I need to hear from you. Leave a comment right now that says, "I watched this far." That is all. Just those 4 words. I watched this far. Let me see who you are. Let me know that you are out there, that these stories matter, that this community we are building together is real. If you loved this story, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. That love has no expiration date, that second chances are real, that no matter how old you are or how lonely you feel, your story is not over yet. And if you have not already, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell so you never miss another story. We have so many more journeys to take together, so many more lives to follow, so many more reminders that even in the darkest night, the rain will stop, the sun will rise, and somewhere, someone is waiting to find you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. Until next time.